Originally, you will walk the land, or at least see a good share of it from the sides or however you can. Then there's the obtaining of a topographical mapping of the property, which is a great tool, so that you can, with both being on the site and using that, you can then go about the routing of the golf course, where you start to consider where the holes are going to lie.
If you're a golfer and live in Minnesota, chances are you have seen, heard of, or played a Joel Goldstrand design. Joel Goldstrand is a Minnesota golfing legend and is responsible for creating and laying out a lot of the golf courses in Minnesota. However, a lot of people probably don't know who Joel was. He was a very influential figure on golf in Minnesota, and yet he was very humble and loved helping people. So often he would kind of push the recognition away and just did things out of the goodness of his heart. In addition to creating all of these golf courses in Minnesota, he just lived a very interesting life. He had an awesome college golf career, did some time on the PGA Tour, was a head professional, and then ultimately got to golf course architecture and just created a lot of the designs that we know here in Minnesota today. Joel comes from a small town in Worthington, Minnesota, where he grew up on the high school golf team, winning high school tournaments there, and just kind of dominating shortstops. He was slated to go to a small college in southern Minnesota. However, he had a very interesting twist and ended up going to the University of Houston.
He was from Worthington, Minnesota, a very small town, and grew up playing a lot of golf there. And then he would play in these, they called them shortstops, which are just in essence local junior events. And he would kind of clean up in that area, but it was a small area and hardly ever left the state of Minnesota. He ended up playing in a tournament in Iowa that was higher level, and there were some college players at that, and he ended up advancing and playing well, and he played with a player who was on the University of Houston golf team. Houston at that time, so this is my dad's senior year of high school, Houston at that time had won the national championship, I think it was 4 straight years, so they're dominating. And right before school started, Al Geiberger, who was the same class as Joel, pulled out and went to the USC at the last minute. He was going to go to Houston. So they had an extra scholarship available. The coach is Dave Williams at Houston, and he was talking to his player and told him about the situation. And the player told him about this kid from Minnesota who's scheduled to go to Gustavus Adolphus, a small D3 school, and play golf and basketball there, but he's pretty good. So the coach of Houston, 4-time national defending champ, calls Worthington, Minnesota and offers my dad a full scholarship a couple weeks before college. He accepts it, boards a train, puts all his stuff in a trunk a week later, and goes down to Houston. And I would give anything to go back in time and see that and see his reaction. He shows up, all these All-Americans, they've just won it. Their team is loaded, and this guy comes in from small town Minnesota.
The pinnacle of Joel's college career is the infamous story at the national championship where he got penalized for having too many clubs in his bag, but it just is a story and a testament to Joel's character.
But they won the national championship his freshman year. He wasn't on the team. At that time, freshmen couldn't play varsity. His sophomore year, they won it. His junior year and his senior year. And then his senior year, they're leading the national championship. And at that time, you play 5 players play, and you count 4 scores. And they had 4 players that were playing well, including my dad. So they were in position to win the tournament again. And the night before the last round, someone put an extra club in his bag, and he didn't realize it the next day because it was raining. They had a rain hood over it until the 8th hole. And at that point, he turned himself in, and he was assessed. It was 2 shots a hole, so it was a 16-stroke penalty. And again, nobody would have known. He could have just not noticed it and kept going, and they would have won the national championship. But you go back to how principled he was, and he told me, I remember as a little kid asking, was it a hard decision? He said, no, it was the second he saw it, there was no decision to make. It was done. He saw it, you turn yourself in, that's what you do. But it really did haunt him for years. He felt just sick about letting his teammates down, letting the coach down. But it was an incredible show or demonstration of how he lived his life.
After graduating college, Joel actually did not go right to the PGA Tour. Him and his wife, they lived in Houston, working jobs, when all of a sudden kind of decided to go to the tour after talking with his friends.
2 years we were in Houston, and I taught school down there, and he had a job with the life insurance company. Our friends from the PGA Tour would come through Houston every so often and come over and have lunch with us or something, and they'd keep saying, oh, Joel, just come out on the tour. He said, oh, I haven't played for a while. And he didn't talk to me about it, but he was playing a lot more golf, though I didn't fully understand that. But what it was he was trying to determine if he had the goods to go out and play on the tour. My last day of school, we left and drove drove up to Flint, Michigan to play the Buick Open. And the funny part about that is, we had to move out of our apartment, send all of our stuff in the moving van, drive to Flint, Michigan, and qualify, or try to qualify. I mean, it was so outrageous. But of course, he was real disappointed that he didn't qualify. But I thought next time he will, but he didn't qualify the next one either. We were still recovering from our long drive and long move and saying goodbye to a life in Houston. Started out kind of poorly, you might say, and just not qualifying. But that wasn't untypical of the time either.
Very strong player, very big hands, strong forearms, had a unique setup where he played real wide. I mean, you could just see he was ready to hit the ball a long ways, but had an extremely weak grip. By a weak grip, I mean he took both of his hands and turned them very far to the left, which is basically an anti-hook type of grip. In fact, he would take the grips of his clubs and he would turn them that way also. So he had his left hand on very, very weak, his right hand on very weak, and again, he did that to prevent the ball from hooking. Again, because of his setup and everything, he just hit the ball very hard, could compress it.
The PGA Tour life back then was way different. There were no private jets. There were no massive six-figure paydays. It was just awesome competition of highly skilled golfers. Sounds like it's a lot more communal than the modern day PGA Tour.
Well, and they get excited for each other when
Oh,
they
yeah.
play well, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Dad finished second in a tournament. And
It wasn't
all his friends
competitive
Would be
amongst-
they'd be so happy for each other because they knew what a struggle it was,
And it was fun that way. And we'd bring the kids out at the end of the tournament and they'd play on the greens. And though I can remember having time where we spent with Mrs. Casper, Billy Casper's wife, and she'd tell about how they'd bring playpens out to the course and put a playpen under the tree and the kids would play. And
One fun thing that I loved learning about Joel is his connection to Karsten Solheim, the CEO, founder of Ping. With every PGA Tour player, you need golf clubs, and Joel was great friends with Karsten, and he actually had the first set of Ping irons on the PGA Tour.
Set of irons. It was just a Balnamic head, and then Karsten milled the two grooves in there, and then they actually had a bend in the shaft, an intentional bend in the shaft, and the USGA made that illegal after about 6 months. So they straightened the shafts, and then Karsten came along and welded additional weight out onto the toe to get it better balanced and get the center of gravity where it should be. So they're literally just handmade, at the end of the day, by Karsten. Later on in his career, when he was a little more connected with Ping, if he missed the cut, he would get putters from Karsten Solheim, who was the founder of Ping, and he would go course to course and sell the putters. And he would sell them for Karsten for $5 a putter.
When Joel decided to end his PGA Tour career, he settled down in Minneapolis and became the head golf professional at Minneapolis Golf Club. In addition to being a head pro at Minneapolis Golf Club, Joel was very influential in the golf scene in Minnesota, setting up tournaments, being a mentor to young and upcoming talent. and just serving the golf community very well.
Yeah, he had a great and long history in golf, and I met him. He was a professional at Minneapolis Golf Club, which is one of the really great courses in Minneapolis. Probably met him when I was, 18 or 19 years old, just starting my college career. And one, step led to another, and kind of added on to his legacy for me. And I realized at some point that he had played golf at the University of Houston. Was a fantastic golfer in his own right. Then joined the PGA Tour and played on the PGA Tour for a number of years. So now here he was as a club professional, and he was a very understated, unassuming, non-self-promoting kind of person. So you would never know, and he would never tell you, how good he was or what he had accomplished as a golfer, but it certainly impressed me that he was such an accomplished player, and now, the professional at one of the best clubs in the Twin Cities. So, I immediately had a huge amount of respect.
After some time at Minneapolis Golf Club, Joel in the winter started dabbling with some golf course architecture, creating small projects. He was just making kind of small 9-hole layouts and bringing golf to areas that may not have a golf course in rural Minnesota.
Designing during those years, he just loved it. He would come home from work and he would go to his office and he would pull out these maps and pull out the drawings and just do it for hours on end, and could just get lost in a project. But I honestly don't think he felt like it was work. The designing portion of it, he absolutely loved.
Joel's kind of big break in architecture came when he designed the Pines at Grandview Lodge.
My name is Mark Ronai. I worked at Grandview Lodge for 44 years. I was interviewing people, and I had a chance to meet Joel. We were friends from the beginning. I wanted a Minnesota architect. My style is servant leadership. You got to have some humility. You got to care about other people. I met with a couple golf course architects, and they couldn't tell me how fast enough how great they were. When I met with Joel, he couldn't tell me just how happy he was to be talking to us, and because he never really freaked out. He was so excited about the possibility here, because he said, this is the greatest piece of ground I've ever had a chance to work with. Walking the course with him, when he had it kind of laid out in his head, he didn't have it on paper yet. If you look and see the Minnesota jungle over there, every bit of this 340 acres was that thick. And just by walking it, he could feel the land shift, because you couldn't see far enough to make it. And he would pace it off, and he'd say, we're going to turn about 32 degrees here, and I think the green's going to be elevated about 24 feet from where we are right now. I didn't see any topo yet. He's just walking it. His feel for the ground was just amazing. Survey's done, topo done. He puts it on paper, cut the 6-foot wide center lines of the fairways. And then he got really excited. I'm finally being able to see what in the world he's talking about. Before that, I was just going, oh, sure, yeah, I see that, Joel, that's great. And it was a little hoo-ha. I had no idea what he was doing.
The Pines was a course that kind of blew up nationally, and it was kind of the gateway for Joel to leave Minneapolis Golf Club and become a full-time golf course architect.
During that time, he was designing during the winter, and then in 1989 or 90, he left Minneapolis and just started designing courses full-time.
All in all, Joel is responsible for over 100 courses in his career. That includes renovations, 9-hole additions, 18 holes, 9 holes, 27 holes. It's just the culmination of all of his work. And while only about 64 of his projects are still open for play today, his impact on Minnesota golf will go long beyond his life. Joel's architectural style, he didn't have like the Rayner templates or, the crazy Donald Ross routings. Rather, Joel just worked on a budget. He made the most of what the client had for their budget, and oftentimes it involved him just kind of routing the best golf course that he could find with the minimal budget. In addition to that, Joel also took a lot of projects in rural Minnesota that involved, communities that wouldn't have golf if it were not for Joel.
Probably the one thing, and again, this is architecturally that he did, is that he had a penchant for putting trees right in the middle of the fairway sometimes. So yeah, anytime there's a tree kind of positioned where you don't think it should be positioned, people go, oh, I bet Joel must have done this one.
He found his niche, let's put it that way. I think his niche was to make golf available, affordable, and fun to play in a lot of, smaller communities across, the upper Midwest. I think he did a lot of work. And if I had to guess, I would say he did a lot of work in a lot of, towns outside of Minneapolis, smaller places, and so I think the animal he was trying to kind of create, was this place where you can go play golf, where you can have a really good time. It doesn't beat you up. It's not meant to be a U.S. Open championship golf course. It's meant to be a course that fits for the communities, and I think he was really successful at that.
Where he did a reversible golf course, where you can play out and come back. So you can play it frontwards, backwards, and again, architecturally very, very cool.
Hard number to nail because, a lot of them he redesigned or added a few holes or just did, if you count renovations and that type of stuff, it would be over 100. And I think a cool stat and something that would make him happy. If you calculate how many people play those courses every year, it's well over 1 million golfers a year that would play courses that he designed. And I know that made him happy because he loved bringing good golf course to especially small towns, where he didn't feel like you had to have an expensive place in order to have good golf, and that just brought him a tremendous amount of joy. I think some of his favorite projects were some of the smaller town ones with trailers, a clubhouse, and that type of thing. But it was a good course and good people to work with, and he really enjoyed that. You can take basically any plot of land and make it interesting. Some are naturally lend itself to it more easily than others, but he felt strongly that you could make a good golf course on a lot of different budgets with a lot of different land.
Some of my favorite Joel courses over the researching of this project that I so thoroughly loved. I really like Southern Hills. I like Wildflower, Fox Hollow. To me, Fox Hollow just kind of is the culmination of Joel. I've played a lot of Joel courses over the making of this video, and I feel like that's the course that I would tell people to play if they want to experience what a Joel course is like. Just making the most out of some great land. Joel kind of had these bunkers that were shaped with all these fingers, and it seems to be something that he liked to do, and it's very prevalent around Fox Hollow. And I also think Fox Hollow is just the culmination of Joel wasn't afraid to go against the grain of what other architects were doing, and that's just shown by the uniqueness of having some different island greens and kind of doing some push-ups, or just going against the unconventional designs of golf course architecture. Joel unfortunately lost his battle with Alzheimer's in 2022.
He knew us and he loved us right to the end, which is remarkable because that doesn't happen. And we know that was a real blessing for us to have him like that. But when you can't get your shoes on, when you can't get your clothes on yourself, the brain doesn't connect. It's a real frustrating disease, and I'm real happy he doesn't have to be frustrated with that.
His impact on Minnesota golf will extend long beyond his life as we continue to play his golf courses, and the people that he mentored and helped get into golf go out into the world and continue to push the beautiful game that we love.
There are easily 1 million rounds of golf played yearly on Joel's golf courses. So you add up all the golf courses that he's designed in the state and the number of rounds that are played on them, there's 1 million rounds of golf that are played on a Joel Goldstrand golf course in Minnesota. That's pretty impactful right there.
I would say, number one, like I mentioned before, he's a very understated person, very unassuming person, very real, genuine. He had a tremendous faith. He was a very faith-based guy. He lived his life with just great integrity and with great principles. When I think of Joel Goldstrand, of course, he's a golfer and he's a designer and all that, but as good as he was at all of those, he's a far better person. My big takeaway is if the world were full of Joel Goldstrands, the world would be a far better place.